My name is Charles Ryu. I'm the United Methodist pastor, currently serving a congregation known as Morningside United Methodist Church. It's located in Manhattan, New York. It has its origin as an English language ministry at Korean Methodist Church and Institute, New York 한인교회. That's the oldest Korean church in the East Coast. It's not the death that kills life, because death in the world, in God's created world, as certain life form dies, it creates new life forms. Always that life and death, there's a cycle of life. So death as part of life cycle. So that's not, I don't think that's what is implied in the question, like kills life. It then means something more like, what prevents full celebration and thriving of life as God has created and intended to be? On the emotional level, the prolonged fear of loss of life, how unnecessary that might be from those who may be highly enlightened, I'm not that, but at least the fear of loss of life as you experience and understand it, that fear actually creates certain, I don't know, suffocation, gag order. And once you have that fear of cessation of your life, people who can manipulate that fear can really, really control you. In other words, if there's a social force that plays on fear, and that becomes a prevalent, whether it is in a family, in an interpersonal relationship, in society, or even in a whole global connections, it will kill life. In other words, it will inevitably curtail or prevent or oppress any life force that wants to come up, celebrate, thrive. When I think of life of Jesus, what are some forces that in the name of religion that have killed life? I could see things like, for lack of a better word, any Pharisaic religious spirituality. I'm not talking about it's historical descendant like rabbinic Judaism. No, in the way Pharisees were at least recorded and portrayed at the time of Jesus. They're rule-based, righteousness-based, and the fear of transgressing the rule. If that becomes the dominant force of your religious life, in the name of religion, in the name of God, we are destroying life. We're killing life. And a K-drama, Hellbound, actually plays on it so very well. This group, they are really preying on people's fear of eternal condemnation, right? And end up creating the society with incredible fears, right? And real life possibilities all destroyed, right? People live in the fear, and it allows a certain group of people to unleash their destructive energy to really kill and have a special powers, right? I mean, National Socialism, same thing. Extreme financialized neoliberal capitalism, which is now, creates enormous fear for the vast majority of the people, just for basic survivals, and it kills life possibility. And church, who's so Western church is so dependent upon that capitalistic survival as an institution, this fear of losing our church institution nowadays is really killing the life celebration that you and I are called as disciples of Jesus Christ. In the church, there are always certain small faction that has been able to control the church. And you are appointed anew, and you want to provide access to the decision-making process to everybody. And then old power does all it can. It could try to bribe pastor, it could threaten pastor, really, whatever it is. Their focus is not on how to become, how to know the will of God, become faithful community of love, and thrive and celebrate, teach that. Their focus is so much on whether this is my church, I want to control these things, and this pastor is in the way, and he's hanging out with the wrong kinds of people. It really prevents from both myself as their pastor and a lot of people who really desire to be in touch with the holiness of God, goodness of God, experience it and share that with everybody as Christ asked us to do. It becomes a long, prolonged battle, you know. How sometimes we at the end become healthier congregation, sometimes it's not. I mean, I remember one congregation, uh, we just have to close a church down, a very painful process. So in that sense, that life possibility is killed. In a personal life, as a young person, where you still don't have all the confidence, there's always fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of what if everybody knows that I'm a fake? All those things, and not meeting the expectations of others. People are important to me, and even internalized expectation. You know, those things create unnecessary suffering, pain, doubts, and has prevented me from really knowing who I am, what God has given me, and what my possibility and limitations are, and celebrate it. Like Romans chapter 7, Paul goes, "Wretch that I am," right? I do, you know, I want to do good, but I do something else than I've intended, etc., etc. Yet he goes, "But thanks be to God, the grace of God that comes in," right? The things that made sense to me when I was a young adult was actually Paul Tillich's sermon, the famous one from Shaking Up Foundation, the "You Are Accepted," that sermon, right? This he makes a little turn, accept the fact you are accepted. I remember when I was like junior or senior in college, it dawned on me that no matter what, how well I do, there'll always be people who will not accept me, who will always critique me, who will be against me. And there are a small number of people, no matter how bad I become, they'll always love me and support me, right? Even though I turn out to be the worst human being in the whole world, they'll still love me, right? Um, when that awareness came, somehow it liberated me. It is a gradual process of self-acceptance, not because I'm so good and all that, but because I begin to trust God's grace in Jesus Christ, who has redeemed me. With God's help, with lots of prayer, continue to create an environment where they experience that freedom of life, the grace of God. I remember one person who was in the later stage of his life. He was sick all the time, and he was one of the group of people who are organizing to make sure that I leave as soon as possible. He was sick, so I wanted to make sure that I don't know that he's in hospital, but I did hear. So I go to hospital, walk in, and he goes, "Pastor Charles, you know I don't like you." So I know, but I'm still your pastor. You can't stop me from loving you as your pastor. uh, and I get amazed, like, that's not me. I don't have the capacity to be that generous because that's not me. I know that. But somehow, as God called me to be a pastor, when needed, there seems to be spiritual empowerment enabling so that I could function as a pastor that God needed me for that person at the time. It is interesting when they see me taking care of their friends, their colleagues, expecting that I would not be good to them as pastor, and notice that I'm still very good. That experience is, in my experience, what changed them slowly. So maybe we, over time, we could really get to what the real issues are. It's not the person who controls what, but can we, in God's grace, be graceful to each other? In that context, life can thrive. Choose life. Choose life. They have a path. One leads to, curse and condemnation. The other one choose blessing. Therefore, choose life. Right? Asking and life, love. I don't know the difference between the two anymore. It just merged from one to the other. When I was doing a retreat at Gethsemane for 2 weeks, I don't know, there was one situation where it was a little difficult to respond properly. The guest master and I were together at the time, and he noticed my struggle. And so he asked me, what were you trying to do? I saw you a lot of hesitation, humming and hawing. And I said, I didn't know what to do. And so I was asking, given this, what is the most loving thing to do at this time that I could do? And he smiled and he's like, you're on the right track. I said, I remember that. So yeah, choosing life. And that means we have to be touched by life. Life is something that cannot be explained or argued for or against. Only those who, think about it, like same with love. You don't love by arguing logically, oh, therefore I love. You've been loved. You're touched by love. That's how you learn love, how you learn what love is. When you meet somebody who is so alive and free, that's when you begin to see the possibility of it, and it resonates within you and say, yes, I want to choose that life, right? And my job is to share that life and love. My question is, we as children of God, how do we choose life now in spite of all these things? With superstructure in my personal situation that prevents us from celebrating, how do we celebrate life more? How do we laugh with Jesus? How do we dance with him? Rather than trying to be so righteous according to religious and moralistic norms. Perhaps that allows us to see other not as enemy, not as demonized target to be destroyed, right? That's what we are taught. But begin to see dancing God in the other person as well.